Good morning and welcome to another episode of Eat, Smoke, Drink. And when I say morning, it is truly morning. It is about 7 o'clock in the morning. This is Eat, Smoke, Drink Coffee edition. Sorry, just bear with me. My glasses is all fogging up. Can't see shit. Alright, so look. Today something a little bit different and exciting. When I saw these two beans for sale, I was like, oh, I gotta get that. So, in a nutshell, we have Kochere, Ethiopian Kochere by Rocket Roasters here in New Zealand. Okay, what makes these two beans today side by side will be interesting is that they're exactly the same state, they're exactly the same bean, farmer, everything, except one is a natural, this one, and this one is a washed. Okay, so exactly the same bean, one is natural, one is washed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first nose the beans, and we're going to nose the cup, and we're going to taste the cup. Okay, so let's start with the washed. Nutty, slightly leathery, some sour plum, freeze-dried cherry powder. Not overly oily on the nose, slightly earthy. I'm just shoving my face right in there. Nothing that explodes in strangers or anything. Just a very pleasant nose. It's definitely a medium to medium light roast. I'm actually starting to become a really big fan of Rocket Coffee. Rocket Coffee is in New Zealand here, their style of roasting, them and Vanguard, okay? So far, my two very favorite roasting styles. They're more filter driven as opposed to espresso driven. So it doesn't mean that the others are bad, okay? It's just more, when you're making filter coffee, you need people that are roasting for filter coffee. And their style so far is becoming my favorite. So there's like clay smell to it. Clay, earthy, but nothing jumps out at me. It says lavender, bergamot, it's probably from there, we'll see. Let's sniff the natural. Straight away, the natural has a funk to it, pickle, slightly sour, like an old pickle jar. Wow, chalk and cheese. That's where the difference comes from. Earthy, this is earthy, kind of like an old honey, maybe brown sugar, slightly buttery, leathery, sour plum, a little bit of sour cherry, freeze-dried cherry, and the natural. You definitely get a sharper funkiness, a vegetal note. You do get some of that leathery, a little bit more of a damp cellar, moss. Wow, I love it. The two are so different. The two are so different, considering they're the same bean, and the roast date is 2 days apart. So you can ignore that. But the processing style, wow. There's a distinct funk to the natural. Distinct funk to the natural. That's awesome. That's awesome. Alright, so let's get nosing with the brew. So I've switched it around. I've put the washed here and the natural here. It just makes sense, okay? Just makes sense because I think the natural has more of an out there flavor, so it'll be good to move them. And apparently these teacups are fancy teacups, so I've got to be careful not to break the shit out of them. So let's get sniffing. Burnt popcorn. Hard to nose actually. Next time I'm gonna have a bigger cup like those whiskey glasses. It's hard to nose. caramelized honey. I'm not getting the lavender or bergamot, I'll be honest with you. Old dry leather. Yeah, toasted rice. There's nothing unusual and out there about the nose of this. A little bit of acidity. Earthy. Nothing too out there with this nose. I'm not getting too much of the descriptive nature from this actually, but maybe it's the glass that I'm using, so I apologize for that. But wet rope. I get a bit of wet rope. I know that sounds weird. I get a bit of wet rope from that. Some freeze-dried plum is showing a little bit. Let's smell the natural. It's chalk and cheese, eh? It's chalk and cheese. A little bit of clay. Wet clay. Freshly tanned leather. You definitely get a funkier, more robust nose on the natural. Instead of this earthiness here and this kind of roasted nuts, roasted grain, you get a bit more vegetative, a vegetable note, a green. Like a wet new leather, newspaper print. You definitely get a funk like an old pickle jar, like the faint waft, distant waft of a bakery dumpster. That's the best way I can, like, you know, that cream that's slightly going off, yogurt that's slightly going off, some sugar that's kind of started to ferment a little bit. Natural and the washed, such a huge difference. It's so hard to know the difference until you side by side them. And yes, you can have one region that's natural, one region that's washed, and it still be different. That's why I did this. So it's exactly the same bean. But let's get sipping. Let's get sipping. Start with the washed. Earthy, definitely leathery. Cereal, toasted rice. There's a fruitiness to it, like a condensed pomegranate molasses. Condensed pomegranate molasses, delicious. Wet wood. Slightly burnt butter. Very rounded taste. Relatively flat but delicious. None of this is negative. Caramelized honey. You know, when you're frying some honey with some vegetables, that honey part. 60% cocoa chocolate bar. Let's try the natural. Yeah, it's ridiculous. The difference is ridiculous. The same beans. The natural is slightly more acidic. It's got a bit more sourness to it. It kind of reaches for flavor a little bit more. Sour plum, sour cherry. Definitely some pickle juice. It doesn't quite taste like a dumpster. The difference is not huge, but it's definitely very clear, okay? The difference is not huge, but very clear. When you side by side it like this, the commonality is actually big because it's the same bean. You can taste it's the same bean, but there is just that slight funk, slight complexity to the natural that the wash doesn't have. Okay, if you like your coffee to be no thinking, just drinking, and that's not a criticism, the wash is a very pleasurable drink. Very pleasurable drink. I mean, it's just so easy and so well-rounded and balanced, and I hate that word, but it's so well-rounded and balanced and palatable. But the natural, there's an X factor that's a slight challenge. The funk is so clear, the two different ones. There's a certain funk that kind of just goes in the back of your nose, right in the end of the palate. I mean, look, I gravitate towards funky and weird coffees and whiskies and food, blue cheese, but I would say this is your camembert, and this is your camembert with a blue camembert, okay? Or brie, blue brie, you know what I mean? Like, this is a creamy cheese, this is a creamy blue cheese. So there is definitely that distinct difference between the two. The roast of the bean does not come through as strongly in the natural as it does the washed. For some reason in the natural it's a little bit more subdued, the roast flavor, and you get more of the herbal, the medicinal. Yeah, look, I mean, it's not every day you're going to get two beans that are exactly the same, except for one is processed natural, one is processed washed. That's why I did it today. Do I really care? No, if it's delicious, it's delicious to me. I have been gravitating towards the weird shit because I like that anyway, but it doesn't mean that it's better or not. I think it's better because it's just more interesting. It adds more to the experience. Okay, I'm all about value add to the experience. That's what it is. Value add to the experience. So if you're going to consume something, you might as well consume something with a little value add through experience. That's my view. But it doesn't matter. I mean, some days I might feel like this one, and some days I might feel like this one, and that really what it comes down to. But if I'm going to choose one, I will choose the natural straight away. There's no way I will choose the wash. The natural, tasting the two side by side, I will go for the natural, hands down. Anyway, until next time, make sure you eat, smoke, drink, and caffeinate. Cheers.